Nebraska landed its 8th commitment over the weekend. 4-star quarterback TJ Lateef, a top 25 arm from Orange County, California, but that might not have been the biggest news of the weekend out of Lincoln. Nebraska hosted, get this, its highest ranked official visitor in the history of online recruiting era, David Sanders. So there's a lot to talk about. That's why I got the man himself, Sean Callahan from Husker Online. We're going to break it all down, but first, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. Husker recruiting is hot, and we're here to talk about it. Go ahead, hit subscribe for me, please. All right, bring in Sean Callahan from Husker Online. And Sean, we'll talk 5-star offensive tackle David Sanders' visit here in a minute. But first, Nebraska lands their guy, TJ Lateef. We know he was a priority for the Cornhuskers, but now that he's on board, how do you kind of build around him?
Well, yeah, they had built really a class of more local prospects with kids from Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado. They had one from Utah. He's the real first national recruit they've added to this class. And quarterback, as you know, is the first important piece of a recruiting class. And ideally, you'd like to have that guy locked up by early to mid-May. And TJ Lateef was really the only quarterback they've courted since the flip of the new year. Earlier, at the end of 2023, they had looked at Alex Mansky, stayed local and went to Iowa State. But TJ Lateef had been their priority. So to get him locked up here in May, now you have a true kind of leader of this recruiting class, somebody that is going to be able to contact recruits and be just a good representation of your recruiting class here as he reaches out to other prospects around the country.
Yeah. So as I said, TJ Lateef is the 8th commitment for this class. A lot of room to grow. So I got to ask you, now that there's this momentum building, who do you think could be the next to commit to Nebraska?
Well, I think the one to watch today is running back Jamarian Parker out of St. Louis. He visited Nebraska, back during spring practice, and he reopened his recruiting process. Now TCU and Alabama have since offered him; others have as well. But I really like where Nebraska sits with Jamarian Parker. I know On3 Steve Wilfong as well has put his RPM pick in for quite some time with Parker to Nebraska. So that to me is the next piece to watch. St. Louis, as you know, is very close to Lincoln in proximity. It has not been a hotbed, though, for Nebraska. They've struggled over the years to get into St. Louis. Keith Williams, though, who helps head the recruiting department, is a former St. Louis high school football player himself that played at Nebraska, played in the NFL. So they've got somebody really good in that role just to kind of be a representative for Nebraska in St. Louis.
All right, let's talk David Sanders. Now, I got this from Husker Online. I think you wrote it, actually. When Sanders stepped on campus, Nebraska hosted its highest-ranked official visitor in the history of the online recruiting era. To me, that's pretty amazing. So to say this was a big visit has to be an understatement, because he also, not only did David Sanders just come, he brought his entire family, including his grandparents. So, Sean, we've had a couple days to kind of soak this in. He left on Sunday. What are you hearing about his time in Lincoln?
Well, I think Nebraska really hit it out of the park with the visit weekend. They did everything right. I think the family had a great time. I think the challenge now with David Sanders will be what's ahead. He's got, obviously, I think 5 or 6 more official visits to, you name it, teams like Georgia and Clemson and some of the Ohio State,
Tennessee,
some of the top programs.
Alabama, Ohio. Yeah.
So I think for Nebraska, they were at the front of this line. Will they be able to stay on his mind now through this gauntlet of visits he's going to go on? But there's no doubt they had a great weekend with Sanders. And you're right on that number. He is the highest ranked official visitor that I know of in the online era that's ever visited Nebraska. Dylan Rhule at one point was number 1 overall in the RPM or in the industry rankings, but he wasn't when he took his official visit to Nebraska, where he ended up committing. So they've had some high profile guys over the years, Marlon Lucky and Dominican Sue, you name it. But David Sanders is as big as it gets as the number 2 overall player right now in the On3 industry rankings.
Pretty incredible weekend. More to come. Nebraska recruiting only heating up. Husker Online has all the details, tons of updates there, not only recruiting, but also football. Sean Callahan, appreciate you taking some time to drop by the Inside Scoop.
Anytime, Josh. Thanks.
Well, you've made it to the end of today's video, but there's hundreds more videos on the On3 Recruits channel for you to check out. And also, while you're here, hit subscribe.